Welcome. My name is John Spangle, and I appreciate you checking out my videos on my YouTube page. I'm a disabled veteran. I'm not able to get out much, and I love to talk about God and talk about topics that people don't want to talk about or have questions about, and so I look forward to talking our subject today. I have a lot of cats and dogs that we have rescue animals, so they may be banging around here making noise. It's kind of hard to keep it quiet with as many animals as we got. We love them so much. So if any craziness goes on, you'll see they're just kind of playing right now. Today I want to talk about a subject that I really get excited about. As a boy, I always heard about Goliath in the Bible as being a giant, and I always thought that was it. But later I learned that there was many giants in the Bible. I really get excited when I see pictures and proof of giants all over. We live in a world that's a world of deception. Satan a lot of times does not want to let the truth be known. You know, I was raised in going to church, but I was raised in the theories of evolution that I disagree with. I believe in de-evolution. I believe that man was actually bigger, stronger years before. Now because of sin, we're getting weaker. I am a cancer survivor. I've had a lot of health issues. That's the reason why I'm doing these videos. It gives me an opportunity to speak to people, speak my mind, what I believe. I never look at my videos and have an absolute. I am learning. I'm 54 years old and I'm still learning today. And I just love to talk about God. And as I said, I'm not able to get out to be with people. So this is my way of self-healing and able to do that. But first off, we talk about giants in the Bible. First book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 6 through 1 through 4. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit now always strive with man forth, that heal so flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of men came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. A lot of times, things that come to my mind is always the Titans and the fighting Olympians in Greek mythology. A lot of times, I look at that and I think, well, the Titans were the bigger giants, and the Olympians were the smaller giants. I think there's truth in mythology. I did a YouTube channel video not too long ago about mythology, and that's the reason why I decided to talk more about giants. But I have found there are roughly 34 tribes of giants in the Bible throughout the Old Testament. And there may be a few others I haven't found, but these are the ones I've found so far. You have the Amalekites, Amorites, Anakims, Ashdothites, Avims, Avites, Canaanites, Kephtorims, Ekronites, Gassathites, Geshurites, Emins, Eskalonites, Gibeonites, Giblites, Giroshites, Gittites, Hittites, Hivites, Horims, Horites, Jebusites, Kadmonites, Kenites, Machanathites, Manassites, Nephilim, Perizzites, Philistines, Rephaims, Saldeanians, Zemsumins, Zebusites, and Sozims. Those are 34 tribes that I've found so far in studying about giants. So they were throughout the Promised Land. When Moses left Egypt and went into the Promised Land, Caleb and Joshua were sent out with 12 other spies to spy the area. And it's well known that the Canaanites, they looked at the Canaanites and said, we were as grasshoppers to them, and to us, we're like grasshoppers. They're so huge. The land was full of giants. And this was because of Genesis 6, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, explains how angels had looked upon men and women of the earth and decided to defile God and to mate with them and make their own races. Angels are in human form. There's many times in your life you may even been with an angel and not even known it. They're not pictured as winged people. Actually, most angels don't even have wings. So they could walk common with man. They have their own purpose that God gives them. There's a hierarchy to angels, which I will talk in a later video. As is, there's a hierarchy of demons. And that'll be another video in the future I'll be talking about also. But today I wanted to, other than talking about the 34 tribes of giants, there is 13 giants that stand out to me that I like to mention and talk about in the Bible. Now, there was 3 giants that are of unknown. I didn't touch much on them because we don't know who they are in the Bible. These are 13 giants that were actually named in the Bible. We'll start out with Adonizek, who was a Canaanite. Joshua chapter 10, verses 1 to 2. Now it came to pass when Adonizek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof were mighty giants. When they talk about these great wall cities, the royal cities, there were some cities that were within Canaanites that were very powerful cities, warlike, walled, and guarded by huge, very, very large giants. Agag, king of the Amalekites, 1 Samuel chapter 15, verses 3, and then 8 and 9. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the rest of the sheep out of the oxen, and of the fatlings, and the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. Now there's reasons for God has us do things. It's hard to understand God wanting these people to go in, kill, destroy everything. But you have to understand this is not a genocide where it's a matter of taking someone's land. These were giants that after the flood, remember the flood was caused by man being so vile. And actually a lot of the giants were larger, and they were cannibals. If you go back and study more, they talk about how they become eaters of men and drinking men's blood and vicious cannibals. Now the giants, an unending appetite. Their appetites were so much that you couldn't be fulfilled. The giants, after the flood, God allowed things to happen again. God is a God of choice. We choose God. For a person to be saved, you're sacrificed by the blood. You're saved by the blood sacrifice of Jesus Christ. He was perfect. He made himself the sacrificial lamb and died on the cross for our sins. You believe this, you're repentive, you will be saved. Later, as a witness, you are baptized. You don't have to be baptized to be saved, but as a Christian, that's something we do. It's not necessary. Or the thief of the cross who recognized Christ and asked for forgiveness. Christ said, "You will be with me today in paradise." He wasn't able to step off the cross and get baptized. So it wasn't a necessary thing, because our baptism is something that you do. It's an outward sign of profession. Whereas as a Christian, we are saved by the grace of God and only by God. It's not something that we do. It's something that Christ did for us. And we accept that, and we are saved always. But God gives reasons for everything. And he was told Israelites to go in and kill. This is when Saul was king, to go in here and kill all these people, men, women, children, everything. Leave nothing unturned. because there was a lot of DNA mixing, a lot of mixing of the DNA where Satan was again trying to stop, infiltrate into God's plan. And so 1 Samuel 15, verses 32 through 35, Samuel kills Agag. Samuel kills Agag because Saul had Agag captured, brought him before Samuel the prophet, and Samuel chastised Saul and told him that he did not know what God's willed him to do. So Samuel killed Agag, and later Samuel didn't see Saul again until Saul was a memorial for his death. And that's the reason why, one of the reasons why Saul died later in battle, was because of disobeying God here. Also, the reason why why Saul was later killed in battle was because he disobeyed God. And because of his disobedience here, later on, his battles were getting worse. The Philistines were hurting him, and he was surrounded by Philistines. And after Saul had died, after Samuel had passed away, Saul went to a witch, medium, to bring up Samuel's spirit to tell him what to do, since he was praying to God. And Samuel was saying, God left you because why? Because you did not do what you were told and kill out all these giants. So Saul was cursed after that, and he died that battle by the Philistines. Third giant I talk about is Ahim. Numbers 13:22. A lot of times we'll talk about this in Joshua because of the spies that were given out by Moses looking into the promised land. And the spies, and they ascended by the south and came unto Hebron, where Ahim, Sheshai, and Talmai, the children of Anak, were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. So these were the children of Anak. Anak was a giant, and Ahim, Sheshai, and Talmai, which I will talk about the other two later, were all three children of Anak. Numbers 13:28 through 29. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. And the Amalekites dwelt in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. So all these mentioned here, like I said in my list of 34 tribes, all these tribes here that I just talked about were all giants. Very large people. And Joshua 15:14, and Caleb drove thence 3 sons of Anak, Sheshai, and Ahim, and Talmai, the children of Anak. Joshua and Caleb later killed these giants. The fourth giant I mentioned is Amalek. 1 Samuel 15:2, thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid for him in the way, and when he came up from Egypt. Deuteronomy 25:17 through 19. Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way, when ye were come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way, and smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, when you was faint and weary, and he feared not God. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about in the land which the Lord thy God for thee an inheritance, to possess it, thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Thou shalt not forget it. So Amalek, as the Egyptians were leaving, as Israelites were leaving, Amalek attacked the back part of the army of Israel. A lot of times back then your army will move forward to give security. The front and the sides will be the vast part of your army. And then in the back would be the weaker people that travel with your army. Because armies didn't travel just army going here, army going there. It was families and everybody. Because the Israelites were moving into the promised land. And there was guards and military men at the back, but not that many. And Amalek went in there and killed those men and women, children, and the old people. and took out a big, large section of the group. That's why God cursed Amalek and sent the Israelites back after him. Another giant mentioned is Arba in Joshua 14:15, and the name of Hebron before was Kirith-Arak, and which Arba was a great man among the Anakims, and the land had rest from war. And unto Caleb the son of Shipha he gave a part among the children of Judah, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, even the city of Arba, the father of Anak, which city is Hebron. So God delivered the city unto the Israelites, which he promised that he would do. Now I'm going to talk about, the sixth person I'm going to talk about is Goliath. It's 1 Samuel 17. I want to read this chapter. It's kind of lengthy, but it's the most famous giant we all hear about. So 1 Samuel 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shoshan, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shoshan and Azekah in Ephes Daman. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of Philistines called Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, which they say 9 feet 9 inches. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of the spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And one bearing a shield went before him, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine? And ye servants to Saul, choose ye a man for you, and let him come to me. And if he be able to fight me and kill me, then he will be your servant. But if I prevail against him and kill him, there shall your servants and serve us. A lot of times in battle they would do that. Armies, instead of 2 armies fighting each other back then and killing each other, they had one who considered champion, who's killed many before, would just walk out and best the person on the other side. And then there would be a treaty made, and one army would subdue to the other army. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that he may fight together. And when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of Ephraim, of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among the men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to battle, and the names of his 3 sons went to battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next unto him Abad, and the third Shema. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. The Philistines drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said unto his son, Take now for my brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. And carry these 2 10 cheeses with the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went, and as Jesse commanded him, and he gave the trench as a host going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, and army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked to them, behold, there came up a champion Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, and now the armies of the Philistines spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to divide Israel he is come up, and I shall be that the man who killeth him. The king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth the Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And people answered him after his manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Elob, his eldest brother, heard him spake unto the men, and Elob's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why comest thou down hither? What hast thou left? Those sheep in the wilderness. I know thy pride and naughtiness of thy heart, for thou art thou down that thou seest the battle. And David said, What have I done? Is there a curse? And he turned from him, toward forward, and spake after the manner, and the people answered him again after the former manner. When the words were heard, when David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and sent for him. So basically, you got the younger brother watching this guy go out there and say, Come here, I'll fight anybody. And, of course, older brothers with younger brothers, what are you talking about? You have to realize at the time, David was young, a young teenager. Some say as young as possibly 14 years old, 14 to 16 years old. And he's out there talking about who's going to fight this giant. And, of course, no one's, to be honest, has the backbone to go down there and fight him. They don't believe they can beat him. And according to tradition, since they called out, the armies were just sitting there. Because once they did the call out, they had to wait for someone to come fight him. So that's the whole reason they didn't attack. They've been there for 40 days, just sitting there. Every day they come out there, Yo, who's going to fight me, man? Come on, you coward dogs. And that's the way it was. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against the Philistine that fight him, for thou art a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant, keep his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear, and took it out of the flock, a lamb out of the flock. And I went after him, and smote him, delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, Moreover, the Lord hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion, and out of the paw of the bear, and he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto him, David, go, and the Lord he be with thee. Now think about it. Yes, you got this young teenage boy, kind of cocky, according to the others, but he did. I mean, he was responsible for sheep. So he fought lions and bears with just a slingshot and a staff. That's all he had. And he fought these two things to take care of the sheep that he was responsible for. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put on a helmet of brass upon his head, and he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his arm, and he said to go, for he had not approved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these things, for I have not proved them. And David put them off. It was too heavy for him, too big. Saul was a very large man. Some say Saul was up to 6 foot 6 inches, which was large back then, because most Israelites were average around 5'10", 5'11". I want to put in at this point, I do believe early man was large. Before the flood, everything was large. Adam could have been like 15 feet tall. Noah, because of sin going down, not as tall as Adam. After the flood, the average person was down to 5 feet 11, 6 foot. Now, everything before the flood, it's because of our atmosphere and everything else was larger. And so the whole earth was different. A lot of people talk about and think about the flood, but they look at what we have today. They don't really they don't think or comprehend that the earth was totally different before the flood. All right, this earth is not millions of years old. The reason why it looks old, because they're a version of a worldwide flood. You had a worldwide flood. Right after the flood, you had an ice age. Dinosaurs were not killed off by an asteroid. That's something that Satan works through people, scientists, to come out with these ideas to discredit the Word of God. There are many scientists, which later in a video, something else I look forward to talk about. It's pretty surprising how many scientists really truly believe in God. I say by science, it's proven there's a creator. I read a wonderful book a few years ago. It's called 101 Scientific Proof of the Bible. And it was just an awesome book. I don't remember the name of the author of the book. Very good book of how you use science to prove that there is a God and the Bible is true. Validates the Bible even. And he took a staff in his hand and chosen 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had given in his script. And a sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. This is so important. This young man's faith was so strong. They picked 5 stones. People don't understand until later when they study. It's because Goliath was from Gath, and Goliath had 4 brothers. All 5 of them were giants, all around the same height and height. Goliath may have been the shortest one. I don't know. He may have been the tallest, but they were all considered giants. David had enough faith. Not only did he pick up a stone for Goliath, he picked 4 up for his 4 brothers. This boy was ready to kick some butt. A Philistine came on and drew near David, and the man that bare his shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained, for he was but a youth and ruby and a fair countenance. In other words, a young man, not rough, tough, no war wounds, nor scars, or anything like that. The Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that comest to me with staves? The Philistine cursed David by the gods. And the Philistine to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. That's a given. In times of battle, all these battles that were hand-to-hand combat, large armies fight each other, and what was left was the fowls of the air would just come and feast. They didn't come back and pick up the bodies. They didn't care. They left bodies there in the battlefield. And said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day was the Lord deliver thee unto my hand. I will smite thee and take thine head for thee, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. It came to pass, when the Philistine rose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran forward toward the army to meet the Philistines. To meet the Philistine. So David wasn't timid. David was ready because he knew he had the backing of God, our Creator. And God was going to use him to kick some butt, basically, is what he's going to do. And David put his hand in the bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone stuck in his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and with the stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took a sword and drew it out, the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut his head off therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel out of Judah arose and shouted, Pursue the Philistines until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Saaraim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of his host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy son liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, I inquire thou whose son the stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, Bethlehemite. I love reading God's word. I love everything in God's word. Full faith, this young man destroyed a giant. Now, you look at people today, there are giants. There's all over. There's people, giant statue. A lot of times you'll see that they're tall, gangly limbs or anything like that. Not to discredit anybody, be disrespectful. But there is a disease called pituitary gland called giantism. A lot of times these people think, well, that's what it is. These giants were just people with this health issue, and their body just kept growing. No, these were people that had the DNA of Satan in them. That's the reason why a lot of times in the scripture, when the Israelites came against these giant tribes, they were told to wipe them all out. Satan was trying to interfere with the DNA, as he did before the flood. He knew the story of Jesus. He knew God was going to create the perfect sacrifice, and he was trying to stop that and to, along the line, through generations, keep that from happening. He almost did it before the flood. When it talks about Noah and his family being righteous, it wasn't just that they followed God, it was because they had the bloodline, they didn't have the DNA in them. Or later, God allowed things, we don't know why, probably because of choice. I mean, God's all about choice. God sends no one to hell. That's something that agitates me. That's my pet peeve. A lot of times, well, God sends people to hell. No, people choose hell. You choose it. You don't spend time with heaven, it's because you chose hell. God's done everything. That's the reason why it's so long for the rapture of the church, another subject I will talk about later. It's not happened yet. Long suffering. He wants you to go to heaven. He loves you. He made himself flesh and suffered one of the worst deaths known to man so you could be saved. And yet people will choose hell. It's just incredible. Seventh giant I talked about is Hoham. Joshua 10, 1 through 27. Basically, it's an Amorite king of Hebron, one of the 5 kings of the Amorites who were defeated in the battle of Bethhoron, after the battle, slain and hanged. I killed them, and afterwards they still hung the bodies. I mean, they were after them. The 8th giant I talk about is Horam. Joshua 10:33. Then Horam, king of Gezer, came up to help Lachish, and Joshua smote him and his people until he had left him none remaining. Jabin, another giant, Joshua 11, 1 through 14. King of Hazar, who Joshua killed by the sword and burnt Hazar by fire according to the will of God. God said, destroy everything. He actually told Joshua to make chariots, string, whatever he did it, not exactly how he did it. So they would go through the village and just burn it to the ground. Another popular giant we hear a lot about, as my 9th giant, is Nimrod. In Genesis 10, 8 through 12, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calne in the land of Shinar. Chronicles 1:10, and Cush began Nimrod. He became mighty man upon the earth. And Micah 5:6, and they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod in the entrances thereof. Thus shall be delivered us from the Assyrian when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. Nimrod was the grandson of Ham and great-grandson of Noah. Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and it was through the Ham's lineage which to Nimrod. Nimrod was also the leader that built the Tower of Babel in Babylon. I've been in the military over 20 years. Unfortunately, that's where my cancer comes from. And I deal with chronic pain, but bless God, he helps me through so much. But I had the opportunity to do security missions right around Babylon. I got into going in Babylon. I got to meet an archaeologist there. An archaeologist was studying me and Sergeant Gauss. Great man, best bud. We served and been through so much in Iraq. Like I said, we were there for 15 months, and it was the beginning of the Iraq War. And I got to go into Babylon, where they rebuilt it. We went in there in the throne room where Nebuchadnezzar, they knew where his throne stood. It's this platform. And we talked, and he talked about the handprint on the wall that would have been in that room, but we don't know exactly where. And they crossed this courtyard area, went into this area where it went underground, where it was um, the wine cellar. And then on the other side, we went farther in, and a lot of people don't go in there. And we went in there. This guy allowed us, and we looked up, and to this day, it chills. I love so much God. Went in there. That's where you hear the story of Daniel in the lion's den. I actually got to be in there where they believe they found where the lion's den were, very very deep underground, and there's slits up top where you can see the daylight. And it was very cold, and just a wonderful blessing, and just the chills. And it wasn't because it was cold. It's 120 plus during the day, and we were underground where it's colder there, but it was just dark, very dark, and just they had just some slits there for light, and we walked around, and it just was awe-inspiring. We also got over the hill there. Behind it is where they think the Tower of Babel was. Now, the Tower of Babel was not just a building skyscraper going up to God. They talk about going up to God, but they use reference on things. Nimrod was a very smart, mighty. He was a mighty man. I don't think it because he was a giant stature, warrior. There's others, Gilgamesh, different stories because they use Nimrod for different names and meanings. Like they think the story of Gilgamesh was about Nimrod. There's got a statue of him there holding a lion. That's how big it was, holding a full maned lion as armpit. So the Tower of Babel, I really believe in portals, dimensions. We live in the fourth dimension, 3 to 4 dimensions, according to Paul. But there's other in the New Testament, but there's other dimensions. And the Tower of Babel was, I believe, a portal that they were trying to make to go into heaven. That's kind of tricky. It's kind of science fiction stuff, but the spirit world is that's what it is, a different dimension when it talks about the veil. But Nimrod was a very evil man, very powerful, smart, and God confused them. If they hadn't, they would have done it, because God says there's nothing these people cannot do. So there was a possibility they were able to do that. And so, which I don't know how they would have done it, because man cannot be in the spirit world, not of flesh anyways. That doesn't mean they could have opened a portal and brought something back. So from there we go to the 10th giant I talked about is Og of Bashan. Numbers 21, 33 through 35. They turned and went up by the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, went out against them, and he of his people, this is to the Israelites, to battle at Edrei. And the Lord said unto Moses, Fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, and all his people in this land, and thou shalt do as him as thou dost unto Sihon, king of Amorites, and dwelt at Heshbon. So they smote him and his sons and all his people until there was none left him alive, and they possessed his land. So we start out Deuteronomy 3, 1 through 13, talking about Og again. And then he went up the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, and he and all his people to the battle of Edrei. The Lord said unto me, Fear him not, for I will deliver him and all his people unto his land, and thou shalt do unto him as thou didst unto Simon, king of the Amorites, Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. So the Lord our God delivered him in our hands, Og also the king of Bashan and all his people, and we smote him until none was left him remaining. First 3 verses similar to verses in the other book. And he took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which he took not from them, the 60 cities, all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og and Bashan. And all these cities were fenced with high walls, gates, bars, beside unwalled towns, a great many. And he utterly destroyed them, as he did unto Sihon and king of Heshbon, utterly destroying the men, women, and children of every city. Remember, total genocide due to the DNA mixing. These were all giants. But all the cattle and the spoil of the cities we took for a prey to ourselves. And we took a time out of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites, the land that was on his side, Jordan, from the river Arnon unto Mount Hermon, which Hermon the Sidonians call Siron, and the Amorites call Shinar. All the cities of the plain, and all Gilead, and all Bashan unto Shashan and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron, and is not in the Rabbath of the children of Ammon. 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, therefore a cubit of a man. And this land which we possessed at that time was from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon, and half Mount Gilead, and cities thereof gave I unto the Reubenites and to the Gadites. And the rest of Gilead and all of Bashan, being the kingdom of Og, gave I unto the half tribe of Manasseh, all the region of Argob, with all Bashan, which was called the land of the giants. So the whole area was the land of the giants, and he was the last. Og was the last of the big giants. There's some giant people after that, but not as the way the DNA was the large giants before. Psalm 135:11 and 136:20 tell of Og's destruction, same thing. Now I referred to earlier, I talked about in Numbers 13:22, Shishah and Talmi, they were, as it says, and they ascended by the south and came unto Hebron, for Ahim, Shishah, and Talmi, these 3 I've talked before, the children of Anak. And then in Joshua and Judges, Joshua 15:14 and Judges 1:10, death of Shishah. And I apologize for trying to pronounce these. I have trouble speaking, and I have trouble trying to pronounce these names. And the 12th giant, Talmi, same as the above. In other words, he died with his brother Shishah. And the last giant I talk about is Sihon, Numbers 21:23-24. But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory, so Sihon gathered all of his people together and went out against Israel in the wilderness, and came to Jahaz and fought against Israel, and Israel smote him with the edge of the sword, and possessed his land from Arnon unto Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of Ammon was strong. Meaning, very defensive position, all giant people. So the Old Testament is full of, when you look at all these tribes that they went against, the Israelites had it in the Promised Land, had to go against. These were all giant people, giant stature, some very large. We look into archaeology to see. There's 2 organizations that I'm totally against. It's National Geographic Society and Smithsonian Institute. I'm really against these organizations because they push a evolution theory, the leaders of those organizations, and it's been known. There's been a lot of talk about Smithsonian Institute taking proof away. I mean, to the fact that, especially in North America, where we've had a lot in the 1800s and later, a lot of newspaper clippings, different things of giant bones fell across North America, and Smithsonian Institute takes these bones, then you hear nothing more about them. And there was a whistleblower that came out of that organization a couple years ago that talked about how they were destroying the bones of giants. And it's just Satan's way of pushing back away from the truth. We just do not think that way. We don't think, we think in our bubble that 1 or 2 giants and that was it, an oddity. And don't realize how this world was covered in giants. When I served in Iraq and I was coming through Kuwait in 2003, I met some special forces guys that were talking about the giant, I think it was up Kandahar. It was in the Afghanistan area. Didn't think nothing of till years later. I was watching the show with L.A. Marzulli. I love, he's a good Christian man. I watch Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, L.A. Marzulli. I love to watch Prophecy Watchers show. Gary Spearman. But L.A. Marzulli was covering the story about a giant that was found in Afghanistan and killed some U.S. soldiers, special forces. Now, I heard these guys talking before. My dates may be wrong. My memory is part of my issue. But it was in 2003 sometime in Kuwait where I talked to these these men, it's in a chow hall. Actually, we're sitting down eating, talking, different things. And I got a subject of giants. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by giants, and got to talking, and that's what they heard, the scuttlebutt, or heard from someone else. So it was not firsthand information, it was information. And this, like I said, was before I even heard anything being presented about giants. I do believe there's giants, not just giant people, as in, like I talk about today, where they're maybe 8 feet tall. I believe there's areas in this world that are left off, and that there's still remnants of giant races. Everything will come about. We're in the end times. Knowledge will increase, and there are just overwhelming things that are happening in our world today. Bible prophecy is fulfilling every day. It just proves the Bible more and more. I'm thankful I'm able to make these videos. I'm trying my best to not be too boring and to further people reaching out and different subjects and look at things and research and study God's Word. Just the love of God is why I'm trying to do this, as long as my health lasts. Thank you for watching my video, and hope to watch some more in the future and make more, God willing. Bless you.